So welcome to the show. Do you want to just introduce yourself, what you do, what your role is, and who you work for?
Sure. So thank you, first of all, for having me. My name is Petru Catana, to be precise. And what I do is I work for MakerDAO. And specifically in MakerDAO, I work for this core unit called Sustainable Ecosystem Scaling. And in this core unit, my role it's a bit of a mixed position, from just doing some ad hoc tasks to helping new teams being incubated, because we have an incubation process in the core unit. So educating those teams about everything regarding Maker, blockchain, the tech, so they can get up to speed. But also, I'm technical by profession. Let's say I'm a developer. So when I can, I also code some stuff, build some tools around the ecosystem.
Yeah.
So I don't actually have an official job role description, to be honest. I can't do everything, which is weird.
Yeah. So I really wanted to get you on the show because this one is going to be like a deep dive into what is MakerDAO, what is DAI, and how does all this magical stuff work. So I thought you'd be the perfect person, as you're working in the company and you have a pretty good understanding of how to onboard people to the company. So I'm hoping that you can give us some really good explanations into actually how all these things are working and what the potential is of this technology. So you mentioned a few things already. You mentioned MakerDAO and you mentioned core units. So do you want to just give us a quick overview of like MakerDAO as a decentralized autonomous organization and explain kind of what that is without kind of going too deep into it, and then also explain like how the core units work?
Sure thing. Start from a very high overview point. It starts with the blockchains, with the crypto technology, right? Especially with the Ethereum blockchain. Ethereum allows you to build these applications on the chain, which these applications then take this characteristic of what the Ethereum blockchain gives you, which is essentially permissionless, decentralization, and all these qualities that allows you to basically kind of fight censorship and so on, right? You then can create like special applications that allow you to make decisions in a decentralized way, let's say, right? And the DAO, like it's an example of that. DAO stands for Decentralized Autonomous Organization, and Maker, like the founders of Maker, right? They went on to create this MakerDAO, which is this decentralized organization that handles the creation of the Maker protocol, right? And I'll explain later what that is.
Yeah, we'll get into
essentially, that. It's in other words, like DAO is what it's decentralized, and that means that the decision making, it's not necessarily done by one head, by one CEO for a company, for example, right? But it's done in more of a community-based with voting, right? And that's where you have this crypto tokens. They usually called governance token, and MakerDAO clearly has one governance token as well, which is called Maker token, right?
So basically, if you're a holder of the governance token, you have a right to a proportion of the vote in decisions that are made in the company. Is that how it works?
Yeah, one token, one vote, right? So clearly, when votes come up, like there's usually a threshold of how many votes need to be approved, let's say, for that vote to pass. But generally speaking, any improvements to the DAO, to the protocol, are done through this governance process, right?
Okay. So how is the DAO actually built? Like, how do you go from 2 or 3 people having an idea to different core units doing different things?
It's a long, beautiful history and process.
Yeah, but we got loads of time, so you just take us through it.
Generally,
I don't want to hear the history. I just want to hear like the basics of how it works.
Well, it starts with just a group of people, right? First of all, you develop the programs, the code that do this job, do this function of, hey, accepting votes and running votes through and having the programs being responsible for the actual protocol and so on, right? Speaking in crypto terms, you have smart contracts, governance modules that, let's say, have the full control of the Maker protocol for all the changes in the protocol. And, those governance modules then are controlled by the Maker token holders, right? So, like, if you dive a bit into the technical form, it's basically a sort of, a bunch of votes sitting in one bucket, and that bucket basically controls access to the system, but only through those votes. And clearly, no individual user can do changes, but only through a governance vote as a whole, right? As a democracy, let's say, you are able to make changes to the protocol. That's how the governance process works in essence. And that is all basically software. That's all built on smart contracts on the Ethereum blockchain. Right?
Okay, so basically what you're saying is you have a group of people who wrote like a really smart code to do something, and then
smart contracts,
through the use of smart contracts, and then basically issued all these tokens out into the blockchain, and then whoever has the tokens can then make decisions based on
exactly. So you see, like all these bits, you can dive deep into each one. So for example, okay, you create the token and you issue it. Now the question is, how do you actually issue it? Do you do a sale to just exchange it in a hard-coded value against Ethereum or any other asset? Like usually there's a lot of work being done in all these different functions, right?
Yeah.
So once the issuance of the token is out, people have the tokens, then they can start interacting with your contracts, with your governance application in, making decisions, making votes for the direction the development of the protocol should take, That's like the general vision. But how this started, the beginning it started clearly the Maker token holders will also vote, but also there was a group of Maker token holders who formed a foundation who were in charge of actually bootstrapping the protocol and developing it and saying, okay, let's build version 1.0 and say this is a very good version, and we release it out, and then we see how it goes. And if we see that we need to improve it, we build another version, we release it out, and we see that, okay, this is the standard that this DAO protocol will be using in the future. Then we as a foundation, we dissolve, and then we become truly a part of the community as well.
Yeah, that's right. So Maker kind of started as like a half a DAO and half a foundation, right? So it was kind of like a group of people who were leading it, pushing it forward, and then actually quite recently,
foundation was part of the DAO, in a sense.
Yeah, so then recently they kind of released it public, and now it's completely autonomous and decentralized.
Yeah, I can speak about it as well a bit. At the beginning, it was always a DAO, right? But inside this DAO community, there was a group of people who formed this foundation that were given the task by the Maker token holders, still by the DAO. Like the DAO entrusted this group of people who formed the Maker Foundation to basically bootstrap and build the protocol, right? Like, because it's hard as a truly decentralized community to really start from the beginning. You need to have more of a faster development process, and when you need to have a faster development process, you need to usually centralize decision making. Like, hey, do a typical hierarchical structure in the organization and hire a bunch of devs, hire business, and like bootstrap all the essential parts of this protocol.
Right. So you basically need a product first, and then once you had the product, then it was able to be more free.
Yeah, like at least for Maker, because it's such a complex ecosystem and system itself. Like maybe other protocols out there could, like now as we see, people just form DAOs here and there, because depending on their complexity, right? But Maker is super complex in this regard, so it took a while to really be who it is today. right?
Yeah, and that's kind of why I wanted to get into this like deep dive into what it is, because
Like what it is today is a whole different story from what it was 2 years ago.
Yeah, exactly. So we kind of talked a little bit how it was like found and what a DAO is, but what's with all these core units and how does it now work with being decentralized?
Right. So back at the foundation, right, Maker Foundation times, we had inside departments that were handling smart contract development, like core development in the protocol, adding new features or making sure everything is all right. And you had departments who were focusing on other parts of the protocol itself, like let's say oracles, where you had departments doing business, integrations, legal stuff, marketing, communications, events, whatever, right? Typical company. Now, when that foundation has been dissolved, the DAO like remained almost like with no teams working for the protocol anymore. You just have the Maker token holders, but like who actually is working? Who's actually making sure that the website is running, the Twitter page is running? New assets are added to the protocol. Like you need someone behind the screen to do some stuff. So when the foundation was dissolved, people inside the foundation they have released a process, a standard called Maker Improvement Proposal. That's a very typical standard in software development and in science usually, or like in engineering, where like you have a process, an application or a technology, and you have a board of improvement proposals. These are just documents that say, hey, we have an improvement proposal for this feature, and here are all the characteristics about this feature, and here it's out, and we want your comments. And that improvement proposal is put into RFC mode. RFC mode is like request for comments mode,
Yeah, and then the community can vote if they want this
community
proposal.
watches, discusses, and so on, right? So the foundation created this framework. It's called the Maker Improvement Proposal Framework, the MIPS framework, which has named documents per improvement, per category. Like, hey, if you want to do technical improvements, you should use this document. If you want to do governance improvements or decisions, use this document. If you want to use create teams, core units that focus on one specific area, you use this document and so on, right? And through this framework, then that was possible for teams inside the foundation to become themselves core units.
So
independent teams that work directly for the DAO.
You could just, as someone who's like we can call it a shareholder, I guess, a shareholder or a token holder, governance token holder in Maker. Mm-hmm. You could go on the public forum and say, I have an idea, this is my idea, and then the community can vote it yes or no.
And you don't have to be necessarily a token holder. Anyone can join there, and if they understand the Maker protocol and the document that they present actually makes sense and adds value to the DAO and the protocol, then that is taken seriously, and the conversation is starting flowing.
Because that's really interesting, right? Because if you walked into, let's say, like a bank and said, "Hey, I've got an idea. What do you think?" They will
have the reaction I had now. They will start laughing.
The clerk at the desk is going to be like, "What?"
Oh man.
But I think as well, like it's an interesting thing, because it has to be like, if you're going to go out there and put something on the internet, you're not going to waste people's time if it's a bad idea. And if it is a genuinely a good idea that can bring value to the DAO, the organization, then it will be taken seriously. And I think that this is like organization structure of the future 101. I think it's really fascinating that anyone can just say, I've got a really good idea, I can bring value to this.
And process for sure. Yeah, it's very cool, right? It's very transparent. Like usually outside crypto, transparency is like, I don't know, it's not used, right? It's not practiced. Like when you start being present in the DAO forums, then you understand what transparency means. You're like, you see everything, if you're really up there and watching everything, what everybody writes, right? Like you have such crazy understanding of everything, But the banks, I think the banks, they are part of a bigger DAO themselves, which are the central banks and the European Union banks, or the central Fed bank in US, for example.
Yeah.
That itself is also a very structured process of making changes. And who decides only is like the guys at the top.
Yeah, exactly. So that's
corruption
like
and
the
so on.
more like traditional financial institution is more top down, whereas this is very much like bottom up.
Horizontal hierarchy.
Yeah.
Yeah, bottoms up, bottom to left to up, like how you want,
Spiral.
Yeah, bi-directional, multi-directional, like you call it.
Okay, so we try to talk a bit about the core units. So how do you make a core unit from scratch, and how do the core units interact with each other, and what does it mean to be like you are working in a core unit?
Okay, so how is a core unit being made? It all starts with usually an idea that
Like one of these proposals that we talked about.
Adding value to the protocol, exactly, right? So imagine clearly the Maker protocol, I don't know, maybe it needs now a new HR department, or like a core unit that is responsible for like handling people and the values in the DAO or whatever, for example, right? You have this idea, and first of all, you work on this idea. You create a good document explaining what this idea is. That means usually if you spin up a mission, vision, strategy kind of document, right? Explaining very well like what's going on with your idea. Where do you see yourself as a core unit? You add some business model there if it happens, right? So in a sense, what you start putting together is documents that are set as requirements from the MIP framework already, right?
Yeah.
So the MIP framework that is put in place, right, has the directions and guidance in
it's basically like a template, right?
Yeah, exactly. In telling you like these are the documents that you have to present about your idea in order for it to be taken at least in consideration.
Yeah, and these guidelines, I guess, was set up by the original foundation, like you said.
Yeah, but clearly voted in by the DAO.
Yeah.
Right, in the end. So these are the guidelines, the other documents that you fill. So you have to fill some documents, creating, first of all, just the same way when you create, let's say, a startup or something. Like you have your idea, you have your mission, vision, strategy. You create your pitch in a way.
Yeah.
In other words, right? You create a pitch and you publish it on the forums, and that's how it starts. And we at SES, where I'm working at, the Sustainable Ecosystem Scaling Core Unit, our mission is to, facilitate this onboarding to the DAO as a core unit. Hence, that's why we have this incubation program inside, where we actually, we take teams who have great ideas about anything that want to add to the MakerDAO, Maker protocol in value, right, or technical solutions or anything, and we guide them through in having, let's say, a proof of concept, MVP product, and also making sure that their documents are up to the highest standard. For example, the documents that they have to publish, the MIP documents, in order for the conversation to start in the forums.
Yep.
So in this process, we help these teams where they also can do it themselves as well. Like it's not necessarily they have to go through our pipeline, let's say, of starting as a core unit.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, pretty much, if you have a good idea, you write your mission, vision, strategy documents. You see that there's good approvals in the forums. You get votes, likes, and so on. Then you're passed into the next stage, which is like a formal approval, let's say, of your idea, right? Which is then actually put on chain to be voted by the actual Maker token holders, let's say.
Okay, so there's like a kind of a 2-stage approval process. The first time is that like a kind of community consensus that this is a good idea, and then once the proposal is kind of gone through that initial community feedback where maybe it's going to change, maybe it'll get modified by some kind of
Exactly.
input.
That's the request for comments kind of phase, right?
Then it's like a formal submission to
Yeah.
the actual DAO itself, and then it gets votes, and if
once it's voted in, then you're part of the DAO as a core unit.